Despite constant missteps, character assassinations, and a glib attitude towards their fans, Lucasfilm continues to lay the blame for all their failures on everyone and everything but themselves. This was never more obvious than with Solo. Despite a bucket load of highly publicized internal problems, an expensive production schedule, disagreements over tone and direction, and firing the original directors 5 months into production, they still couldn't admit that they made a bad movie. But when the shills were sent forth to explain away the failure, they found themselves in a pickle. With Danny Glover, Emilia Clarke, and Thandie Newton all getting moderate to high praise, The Last Jedi defense, toxic fandom, couldn't be trotted out. They needed to get creative. A lot of reasons were laid out for its failure, none of which was Lucasfilm needing to take a good long hard look at themselves. Instead, they blamed one of Kathleen Kennedy's more craven statements on Solo was that they shouldn't have recast a central character, laying the blame squarely at the feet of Alden Ehrenreich. The poor guy had already copped a fair bit of criticism, so a pile-on from Lucasfilm was a shitty thing to do, and the internet was quick to point that out to her. Instead, she doubled down, reversing her position that they might still recast some characters, just not the central three. Yeah, not quite the apology she thinks that is. Poor Alden didn't make another movie for 5 years after Solo, and even then, it was Cocaine Bear. He had a tough gig in playing a young Harrison Ford, and not sure anyone could have pulled that off. Watching it, you can see he's playing it differently for 3 different directors, so not sure you can really blame him. Bob Iger suggested that 4 movies in 4 years was just too much Star Wars. Meanwhile, Disney released 10 Marvel movies in the same period, so yeah, that one doesn't really stack up. The implied suggestion here, though, is that quality control was an issue. That in the rush to get out content, the quality had slipped, and despite the noise that Kathleen Kennedy would make about all the projects in the works, it's now been 5 years since the last movie, and another 2 before the next one is scheduled. And in that waiting period, we got Mandalorian Season 3 and The Ben Kenobi Show. So yeah, I don't think time was the problem here. You know what? I'll give them this one. But I'll also point out that it was totally self-inflicted. Scheduling Solo between Deadpool 2, Avengers Infinity War, and Incredibles 2 could not have been worse planning, especially given that the latter 2 are both Disney products. I don't know how they let this happen. Presumably there's a calendar on some intern's wall with release dates, and the fact that no one looked at it and thought,
I have a bad feeling about this,
is beyond me. Why not stick with December like they'd done for all the other Star Wars? All they were up against was Aquaman, Bumblebee, and some cartoon Lord and Miller went on to make after they got fired from Solo, and oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, that's embarrassing. This comes from the bean counters, and sure, the first trailer dropped only 3 months before the film, but again, this was self-inflicted by wedging it up against The Last Jedi. It was also pointed out that the teaser only had about 10 seconds of screen time where Ehrenreich's face was seen, and he hardly spoke when he was. So instead of selling Ehrenreich as the new Han Solo, they hid him and hoped you'd still see the movie. Again, this was Lucasfilm's fault by blowing the budget on reshoots and a new director. The meager marketing told audiences that they knew they had a dud on their hands, so they weren't going to throw good money after bad. But with all the free press and promotional tie-ins, did anyone really not know there was a new Star Wars movie at the cinemas? Maybe? Really? There was a lot of hand-wringing over the boycott Solo hashtag that did the rounds, but it was so short-lived that by the time they tried to milk it, it had fallen out of the zeitgeist. Meanwhile, a year later, the hashtag Make Solo 2 Happen spent a day at the top of the trending charts. They even made t-shirts. Nepo baby Jonathan Kasdan, who co-wrote the film, claims he's too afraid to ask Kathleen Kennedy about a sequel, which tells me she must be a delight to work with. Truth is, the online chatter was mostly still distracted by Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi, and the call for a boycott hardly made a dent. Still, nice try though. What else you got? Ron Howard said that some friends of his in Silicon Valley told him that there was a deliberate push down on the want-to-see score on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. This, according to Howard, was a coordinated incursion by Star Wars trolls trying to ruin it for everyone, and not at all simply an accurate barometer of what actually happened. Howard's putting way too much stock in the echo chamber of critics, and he's really grasping for straws if he thinks the general audience, or even fans, were regularly checking the want-to-see score for Solo on Rotten Tomatoes, or, dumber still, taking advice from it. Oddly enough, of all the reasons listed as the reason for the film failing, none of them included A jumbled tone, the super slow speeder chase, this guy who looks like he belongs in Lost in Space, that guy who was boring, the weird sex stuff with the droid, this cameo, Val killing herself for no good reason, Thandie Newton criticizing the film for killing off the first female black character, the reconfigured Falcon, terrible lighting, I can't see anything, waiting to see the Kessel Run then making it lame, clunky dialogue, droid writes, the missed opportunity of just remaking the Magnificent Seven, Lando's diary entries, Danny Glover telling everyone that Lando was pansexual, making this Wookiee look like the Wolfman, terrible word of mouth, making the movie equivalent of the Han Solo Wikipedia page, quote-unquote strong females, populating the planet that's super poor with black people, racist much, Han speaking Wookiee, every single cringe-inducing line of L3's dialogue, and most of all, just making it all so boring. But yeah, sure, it was probably the hashtag.